Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maria Luisa, and I'm the project manager of this project that actually it's based in Gaza, in two areas of the Gaza Strip, in Jabalia district and in Gaza Governorate. This project, let's say, it's the result and second phase of a previous project, always funded by the Italian cooperation, and is based on the lesson learned of the previous one. It just started 10 days ago, so now we are in the phase selecting the beneficiaries, so we are not really in the ground with all the activities and with all the implementation, but let's say that the main idea of the project is to start to support the resilience of agricultural households, providing water infrastructures and water sources for agricultural purposes. As overseas, we always work in agricultural fields, so the idea, and usually we never work on humanitarian aid and recovery as it is, but we always try to look on a longer perspective. So in this case, the idea was to tackle two different types of farmers. Farmers having open land and farmers that have their agricultural wells destroyed during the last attack, partially or completely destroyed. And when we think to these farmers, we have to think to farmers that usually own at least 10 dunums, 15 dunums. So let's say that have a sort of property, and think to agriculture not as develop cash crops, like it's always called here in Palestine, so not cultivating the land to have crops that can immediately give funds to the market, but that can be interested in planting even trees that will take much more times to have a profit, so even in a longer perspective as solution. And the second category of farmers that we are working with are vulnerable farmers and poor farmers that usually own maximum 1 dunums, 2 dunums of land, and works on greenhouses. And in that case, the main idea and the main interest of these farmers is to start to cultivate the land as soon as possible and to have crops like cucumber, tomatoes that can be immediately sold in the market in order to have cash as soon as it's possible. So to work after the attack, the idea was to rehabilitate this water infrastructure, so to provide water, nothing more than water in this case, because the idea is to support farmers that were already doing their job before the war, and farmers that are willing to start as soon as possible their activity as soon as they will have the possibility to have their access to water restored. So to do this, let's say that work with agricultural wells, it's like working more on infrastructures. We are thinking about agricultural infrastructure that costs a lot of money and needs even a lot of energy. So the idea is that in this case, we will work with engineers, contractors, and so on for the rehabilitation or reconstruction of the wells and the installation of all the water networks connected. And let's think that usually this one agricultural wells is shared at community level. So it's not one wells for one farmers, but usually you have 6-7 farmers, so 6-7 families that share these wells. And this it's always related with common infrastructure that you have to share with different people. But in the case of Gaza, usually, in the 99% of the cases, the other families are always part of your extended families. So it's even much more easier to deal conflict in that case, in the use of the water sources. And in the other case, thinking about the greenhouses, we will start to implement a small system, thinking to connect the greenhouses with a photovoltaic system able to connect the water pond that are like water reservoir that are very common in Gaza, that are in order to collect the water and to connect this water that can come from an agricultural well or directly collected with rainfalls and so on, and to push this water from the water pond to the greenhouses. And at the same time, the idea is that since we have the photovoltaic system, to share even the energy that will be produced with homes, possibly very close to the greenhouses, in order to serve the needs of electricity for the private homes. If we want to talk about environmental sustainability, we have some question marks, even regarding our project, because obviously all the time that you draft a project and you develop a project proposal, I think that it's impossible that you think that it's the best solution as you have. So I just want to share with you our question remarks. So we can say that using a photovoltaic system, it's really environmentally sustainable. Actually, for the situation in Gaza, is not so true. Because if we think how the photovoltaic system it's working now in Gaza, is not like the photovoltaic system that we have in mind in Italy and in Europe. So we have the production of energy, but we are talking about a closed system. So for example, all the energy that you produce, you cannot share with the network. And for this, we need battery. So let's think that, okay, in our case, our project, it's working with 4 photovoltaic system. But let's think, if we would have the money, like 20,000 million euro, to do the same for all the Gaza Strip, could this be an environmental sustainable solution? Not at all, because how it's possible to manage the battery, the waste management of the battery. So for that, obviously, all the time you have to think about the scenario. We don't have 30,000 euro at disposal, so the idea was to try to find a compromise between the situation in Gaza, where you have a lack of electricity every day, on a daily basis, a context where the idea of photovoltaic energy is not developed at all, so it's still considered as a new technology and is not considered as an alternative solution. And on the other side, let's think to the cost. So if you think about farmers, you just don't want them to go back to their production, to their activities, but you want even to support them to make their products much more competitive in the local market. So you just want even to reduce their production cost. So working on photovoltaic energy and solar panel system, you can reduce a lot this cost. So in this way, you can give an advantage. But these question marks for us remain. So obviously, during the project draft proposal, we think about many solutions, and if you want to think in a longer term period, the idea is that why we cannot start to study how it's possible to create this system that can work maybe at village level with municipality. Obviously, to do that, you have even to deal with the authority that is in Gaza. you have to deal with the different actors that you have at local level. But an idea, it's exactly how to create a system where if I own a solar panel, I can create all this energy, and for the time that I'm not using this energy, I just can share and send to my neighbor, send to the village council, electricity center, I don't know, in order to have to reduce the problem of the battery and the waste management of the battery that connected with all the waste situation in Gaza cannot be just considered as a less or a smaller problem. And another thing is that this project, it's very short, it's 6 months. Okay, for the call, we could have even think to 9 months projects. So we have to think in a very limited time. Sure, and the idea was just because we need to have all these things ready and all this infrastructure restored maximum by March, April. So we were thought to have the project beginning around September, because the idea is that why we need the water, we just need the water to let the farmers be ready for the next summer season. And with a longer project, so going maybe until June, July, this would have meant just to let the farmers losing even the summer season and wait for the winter one in November. So the idea is that obviously in 6 months, as we reduce all the activities as much as we can, you cannot do much more. But the idea is that at least, since we talk about emergency, all the agricultural households that have been displaced and that are not productive anymore since the last attack for the summer season will be able to cultivate their own land. That's it, more or less.
There's any question? Okay, I want just to like analyze and see where we can assess or see the environment sustainability, since this is more like about the wells. There has been like a process of selection of wells on how they were like brainstorm the construction or the use with the farmers.
Okay. Okay, for the selection process, I think in all intervention after a war and after an attack, it's really, really sensitive. So it's even in this case, it is, because we just have the possibility to work with 7 agricultural wells. So the idea is that how now we are selecting, because we are just sharing the questionnaire and we are just working with the local committees in the different area, and we are just collecting the application. So the idea is that first of all we decide to give a priority to the farmers that are working close to the buffer zone and farmers that have been much more affected during the last attack. So, for example, we are talking about Gaza Governorate, but now, and even with the previous visit that we did in the previous month, the idea is, for example, to focus much more on Shujaiya. So, in all the area where the conflict and the attack was really affecting the population. Another criteria is to really have farmers that are willing to start as soon as possible, as soon as they have the water. And so this means that we need even to have farmers that, even if they are displaced in another area or in another neighborhood, they can ensure that when the agricultural wells will work, they will be able to go to their land and to start the cultivation. And let's say that obviously we look at how is how is the household itself. If there are persons with disability, if if some members have been killed and during the attack, and especially if the male presence in the households has been killed during the attack. So we try to use this, but with this we decide even to work with the Ministry of Agriculture, because what we asked, because in a context like Gaza, I think it's fundamental to have the coordination. So we asked to accept an application, we need to have the certification of the Palestinian Water Authority, saying that the well has been partially destroyed or completely destroyed, in order to keep this coordination working on, because otherwise in a situation like is Gaza today, you can have a spot action doing something, but after, when they will receive other monies, they will work on other things and so on. And in this way, at least you have, you know that you are doing a little piece, and in the coordination of all the funds that are coming for the reconstruction, there will be for sure no overlapping, no.
So it seems that you are using mainly social criteria for this selection. Did you consider any environmental criteria beside the fact of the wells has been distracted? But what will happen if you select one well and then you will find that the water is salinated, whatever? So are you considering also to take those, and which way you will give to one and another? Because I think this is something really difficult in such kind of project, to decide if you will weigh more the social or the environmental criteria.
Yeah, for example, for the water issue, why we decide even to work close to the buffer zone, because it's the area that it's more far away from the sea. So the water that goes to the buffer zone area, has a different, is less salty, let's say, even if you cannot say that it's the pure water, the water that we're used to have in other contexts. But regarding the environmental sustainability, I would like to highlight another question marks, because even agricultural wells in a situation like Gaza are not so sustainable, because if you keep pumping water, and this is something that in Palestine all the people loves to do, because I don't care if after 5 years, 10 years, I will not have any more resources under the ground. But so if you keep pumping, after a certain point, you will not have water anymore. And this you can find in Gaza Strip, you can find in the Jordan Valley, where the main issue, in many cases, okay, but I don't care, I need the water now, so let's start to dig the ground and to pump. So taking even this in consideration is that obviously we cannot say it's like a green project, because it's not. But if we want to give even the trust to the people to go back to their land, to restart an income activity and so on, obviously you have to make a compromise. And especially if you want to work on Gaza with water, you will never find the perfect scenario without zero impact on environment, because the situation is the situation that we all know. But I think that it's even important be clear, and so don't want to sell your product as the best one, and knowing that, okay, if you're doing something, so at least you have to rebalance with another, with something else that can make your activities and your project benefiting much more. And for example, the issue of keep pumping the water, is an issue that you have to keep advocating and lobbying, but obviously it's not an issue that such a small NGO as ours, as overseas, can solve. So on this, like on the waste management for Gaza, you really need to work on to advocate, but at high level. And in this can be even the Italian cooperation that can play a role much more than us, all the international actors. But obviously, as a small NGO, when you design an intervention, you have to be, you have, at least you need to have all these scenario clear in your mind.
No, and that's, I think, is really important as a small NGO. As you said, I mean, the limit is to do at least something that makes the difference and can really rebuild people's life. That might be the case, but of course not forgetting about like the framework and maybe to think about advocating or with another project doing other kind of intervention which impact less on this. And
No, sorry, no, just I want to make it clear because like all the criteria or the assets for the environmental sustainability that has been presented today are not really something that it's really going to happen, but I think is like a direction. They can give us directions for where to assess and where to go in order to contribute, as we used to say, to the environmental sustainability. So it's not like something that I achieve, it's something that I go toward.
Then regarding the photovoltaic system, I completely agree with what you said about of course, if it was in a grid, it was much more efficient. But let's say that for a post-emergency project is something good. I mean, with problem about like energy supply to have a photovoltaic system. So you said that you proposed it, even knowing the problem with batteries and waste management of batteries, but also I would add the management of batteries operating, because who will take care when something will be break? I mean, so the question are two: if you thought about a management system for for those installation, and then how you evaluated the fact that. Anyway, installing the photovoltaic system, which is really costly. For example, in Europe, we all know that if you don't have the support, like the subsidizing from the state, is not something that you will do because it costs a lot, actually, the installation and the maintenance. So, what kind of criteria and element you evaluated in when you did maybe a business model or a payback scheme to understand that anyway it was much more economic for the farmers to have this system instead of using, I don't know, maybe generators, whatever they are using?
Yeah. Okay, the idea of the photovoltaic system was coming exactly during a field visit that we did like at the beginning of 2014, and we went to visit the farmers in the north, close to Betanun. He was a farmer owning around 20 dunums, so quite such a piece of land, and he was even a farmer producing honey. And we went to this farmer because some others from the community said, there is this crazy farmers, but you know, he has connection with US, he has been there outside a lot, so he has always crazy idea. And when we arrived, all the roof of his home was completely full of photovoltaic, of solar panels. Photovoltaic system, yeah. So we asked them, okay, but so there was a project that supported you that fund? And he said, no, not at all. I just start to make some calculation. In that area of Betanun, there was no connection with the electric system, so the only way for him to have energy was with the generator putting fuel. So he said, I just went to the bank, I asked a loan to the bank, showing them that, okay, with this investment, now I'm able to buy 14 solar panels that are enough for me to irrigate 15 dunums out of the 20 and to make my homes self-efficient. And I told to the bank that in 1 year and a half I will be able to repay the loan compared, since I will not have to pay each month $500 per month as I was doing before, putting always fuel in my generator. So the idea was, okay, there is a person that completely by himself is going to a bank asking a loan to do this. Obviously, it was a person that have been abroad that was able to make even if a simplified business plan, so to calculate exactly how much was the cost for his production at family level. So the idea was, okay, let's try to think even for other farmers having 1 or 2 dunums. So in Gaza, let's say that for the greenhouses system, you can find a good quality of solar panel with around $10,000. So the price is a little bit different from the one that we are used to in Europe. And why we use the solar panel just for the greenhouses and not for the agricultural well? Exactly for this cost efficiency evaluation, because for an agricultural wells, the needs of energy would take a system that would cost around $60,000. So the idea is that, okay, if I have to use $60,000 for just one wells to put this solar panel system, I consider it in a context like emergency with limited fund, a waste of resources. For the greenhouses, it's different because you can work on the greenhouses and you can work even with the home of 1 or maximum 2 homes nearby them. And why we start, for overseas, this is the first project on this photovoltaic system in Gaza. And why we didn't do it before? Because it's just 1 year and a half that in Gaza you have a company, at least now you have 3 companies that are based in Gaza that are selling solar panel. Before, if you want to buy a solar panel, you were going to some engineers close to Bethlehem or others in Ramallah. So the problem of the management of the system was always the people from Gaza calling the engineer in Bethlehem, say, okay, happened this, just describing by phone, and so on. In this case now in Gaza, the person can go directly to the field, and so obviously this is even a part of the contract. So when you buy the solar panel, you have to insure me and to give me a guarantee, and usually they give 10 years around, more or less, and they are inside Gaza. And of course, even in this case, if you collect all the quotation and you have a tender and you can find a good price from a factory in Bethlehem or in Ramallah, you have to choose for the one that is inside Gaza, because otherwise, in a longer term, it will not be, the management will be really a problem, considering the dust that we have in Gaza. Yeah.
And who will take care? I mean, who will manage the system itself? Cioè,
Okay.
seeing the batteries and, like if a battery is broken, who will go to buy and repair it? I mean, you created a...
Okay, the issue is like that. Now we are not, since we are at the very, very beginning of the project, we just have some scenario in our mind. So the idea is that in this case, since we work with a system that will be connected to 1 or 2 homes, if it will be just one, the management is quite easy, because inside the families you can find a good way and a good approach how to solve this issue. What we have seen in the experience, for example, with these farmers, the farmer itself, the one in Beit Hanun with all the solar panel system, the farmer itself was able to go to the bank and so on, but was completely without zero knowledge, with computer issues, or even with the battery and so on, while the son, that was around 20 years, something like this, was really feeling comfortable on all these new technologies. So maybe the idea is to go in this way, so to train all the family once the system will be provided, but maybe to push on the youth and to try to give much more responsibility to the youth of the family, because they are much more used to new technologies like this, and maybe can, but these are just the scenario that we have in mind, but we have to go really much more on the ground to answer on this.
I have another question. Concerning the agrobiodiversity, have you seen, and since I know you had a project on such a topic before, have you ever seen to trying to supply for varieties that require less water or less agricultural management?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, when you talk about water efficiency, you have to think about even the different type of crops, and exactly not to waste water, even in your in the way how you irrigate your land. And what we are quite familiar here in Palestine is that sometimes, okay, you have the water for 2 hours, just let's put as much as water as you can on the land, and it will help. Anyhow, I don't know how, but it will help. We have for these 2 hours, so let's pump. Obviously, this is not so efficient. So for this, okay, our partner, that is IWAC, it's really good on this, but we added even a specific training during the, even if it's a short period project, exactly how to reduce the waste in the water management. So in the way how you irrigate, in the way how you collect the water, even the rainfall, and in the way how you choose the crops, and trying to clarify that for different crops you need a different quantity of water. And so not all the water that you are used to use sometimes helps. Sometimes it's creating the other effect, that too much water is just covering the land and all the plants, and that's it.